Namaste, welcome to Satsang today. As always, Satsang is for the direct realization, experientially, of what we really are, as opposed to just thinking about it, believing in it, and experientially realizing what we are and living as that is going to bring us the greatest peace, the greatest clarity, joy, wisdom, love, sense of compassion, all of that. And one of the most challenging things for me in my own awakening journey was to find out the fastest and easiest and simplest way to come to permanent, effortless, stable peace that stays no matter what happens to the mind, no matter what happens to the body. And that's really what I want to talk about today, to kind of continue where we left last satsang. Last Thursday's satsang is uploaded to YouTube. You can watch that. And we did some very direct self-inquiry. And we saw 4 or 5 times at least each person that they couldn't find a separate being when they looked. So when I say my body, my mind, my emotions, my life, my relationships, my desires, even my awakening, what is that me that I'm referring to? So if you haven't seen that, I would advise that you watch that, because as we can do it right now, if we directly look to see what we actually are, can we find this separate being that says me and my all the time? Because if we're not actually a separate being, what do we find? We find something much more expansive, much more and very different to what we thought we were. Because while I'm sure that I'm a separate being, that I'm separate to everything else and everyone else, my life is going to be run by my karmic patterns, my ideas, and I will believe in many things that aren't true, such as having to get back to the self, even having to merge back into the infinite self. So here today, really just to challenge this. And I wanted to go a little bit further into what it really means then if we can't find a separate being, because that wasn't really clear to me. It wasn't obvious to me when I first, it had an impact. When I first saw that I wasn't separate, I couldn't find this Helen, this separate being that my whole life had been based around. And even my whole awakening had been based around this entity that I thought I was. And when I actually looked, all I found, there was a body, there was emotions, there were thoughts, there were sense perception happening in that body. And there was also this empty, spacious formlessness. And that is really the truest essence of what I am. I can call that awareness, consciousness, presence, self with a capital S, noumenon. There's so many different names, beingness, and they all point to this same essential essence of what we really are. So if we're looking and not finding a separate being, that can be very shocking at first. So shocking that it begins to have an impact on our awakening. And that's a good thing. It may not feel good, but it is a good thing. What does it mean then if I am not actually the separate being that I thought I was? What does that actually mean to my finding peace and my awakening in general? Well, the first huge thing that began to impact me from this was, who is it that has these karmic patterns then? These karmic patterns that to a separate being, my idea of who I think I am, these karmic patterns are magnetically drawn. Well, I think I'm a separate being. I'm also going to feel mostly unsafe, unworthy, unlovable, I'll be searching in my outer world, in my relationships, and I'll be looking even to my awakening to give me a sense of approval, recognition, love, understanding, acceptance, all the things that I think I'm missing. All of our karmic patterns, however it's playing out, whether it's in our finances, our career, our relationship with our siblings, our children, our parents, with our body, however our karmic patterns are playing out, the root of them all is that we're trying to get something from the outside in: security, love, approval, validation, recognition, and all of that is only possible for me to feel that I have karmic patterns to transcend while I believe I'm a separate being. So this is the first major thing that I began to recognize, that we really began to loosen these patterns. Who do they belong to? If I can't find this me entity that has been the central focus of my whole existence, then who is it that's trying to get rid of these karmic patterns? Do I even have any karmic patterns as my real self? And the second thing that really hit me was, who is it that's trying to reach awakening then? Always this forward momentum, seeking something that I didn't feel I had right now, even for a short time after seeing that I wasn't really a separate being. I was still trying to get rid of this sense of being a separate being. So over time, this began to reduce, and eventually this sense of being a separate being was replaced by the recognition that I am infinite and formless. And with that comes a recognition that I've never had any karmic patterns. That to imagine I have a karmic pattern, I have to go back to thinking of myself as a separate being, because every karmic pattern I have involves me and something else or someone else. So me and fear, or me and unworthiness, me and this other being that I keep having a conflict with, me and this job that I can never seem to find the right one, me and my significant other or spouse or whatever, who I can't seem to come to peace with. Every single karmic pattern we could ever have involves me and other, me and time, me and peace I'm trying to get. On and on it goes, ever more subtle. So this is the first, and I'm saying these because this is where my awakening really got held up. I saw quite early on that I wasn't actually what I thought I was. But the real impact of that took some while to hit me. And this is what I'm trying to speed up for you here. Who is it that's struggling with your karmic patterns then? If you can't find that separate person that you've thought yourself to be, what remains for you to do now with these karmic patterns? Does the silence, the stillness, the consciousness, the pure awareness, the self, the noumenon, does it have any karmic patterns at all? And perhaps more importantly, perhaps these patterns will come up one more time once you see this, to recognize that this is not something I have to do anything about. So an old familiar feeling of unworthiness comes up. Where are you going to interact with that from? Are you going to interact with it as a separate being again and try to release it, or try to transcend it? All of those are subtle ways to keep yourself separate from it. Or does it come up again for a clear seeing that this only exists in my imagination when I believe myself to be a separate being? It feels extraordinarily real when I believe myself to be separate, because I really am the infinitely powerful one being, the self. Any idea that I believe in, I'll experience is very real, very real. Hence the fact we even need satsang to kind of wake up out of this illusion of being a someone moving through time and space. Now, when I've begun to see this about my karmic patterns, that they didn't really exist, although they really seemed to, and came up again a few times for confirmation of this, I can't find the person to whom they belong. Again and again, it's not there. It becomes clearer and clearer. It's never been there. And when the self, the infinite, omnipresent being, the one being that is all of this, when it imagines itself to be a small, finite, limited being, then it begins to imagine all kinds of other things, like other beings existing outside of itself, other things. It begins to believe more in the names and the labels and the shapes of the forms than the essence of those things. And it creates for itself and its imagination a whole universe of separate beings and things, and then has these inner reactions and responses to these things. And that sustains this illusion indefinitely until we actually look and see we can't find this person to whom this is all happening. So if you're not 100% certain on that bit, then I suggest you go back and watch the previous satsang from last week. Just confirm to yourself best you can that you can't actually definitively say, you can't find this separate being. Yes, there's a body. Yes, there's a sense of someone, but can you actually find it? That sense of someone still is here for me now, but it's been seen so many times that it's not actually there. It's just a sense that's generated by sense perception going on in this body and thoughts and emotions and all of that. That's the first thing to be clear on, that you're not a separate being. And then looking at the impact that has on your karmic patterns. And then the third thing, which is really a huge, huge thing, and all of these three are the same, really. And they can, in some beings, happen all at the same time. Others, it seems to unfold sequentially like it did for me. The third thing is then that if I am not a separate being, if I can't find my person, other than it seems to be a feeling, then so too nobody else is either. So if I can't find where I end and where I start, if I can't actually find a boundary to my beingness, when I look at my essence, I know where my body is and isn't, I know where my thoughts are, but my essence, if I can't say where that stops, or I can come to experientially see that it doesn't stop, that something formless, like the space in this room, can't really be divided, then am I really separate to anyone else? Is anyone else or anything else separate to me? And this took me a little while to really grasp. If I am not a separate being, I'm saying it again because it's so important. It took me a long time to get this to, and I want to shortcut that for you. If I am not a someone like I thought, is anyone else then? Where do I stop and where do they start? And one of the ways that we keep this illusion alive for a long time afterwards of being a separate being is really by imagining others are separate beings, that there actually are other beings, there are other bodies. But are there other beings? If I'm not limited here to a someone, and we saw that those 5 people, 4 or 5 people I did the live examples with last time, couldn't find a separate being either. If we asked any human being to do this, and they were ready to see, they would also find this separate person missing, absent, never quite been there at all. Really, really imagined to have been there, therefore experienced as if true. So looking at what we feel separate to still, who we feel separate to. Because to perceive someone else as a separate being, we have to create an imaginary boundary between me and that being. And we go back to feeling finite and limited again. So if you find yourself in a position in your awakening where you're saying, I've seen so many times that I'm not a separate being, but I don't feel infinite. I don't feel boundless. This is why. It's because we're still imagining that other beings are separate to us. The moment we see a separate being out there, we make ourselves back into a separate being here. Then there's at least two things in the universe, at least. This other being and me. But if we can spend just a little time proving experientially that I can't find an edge to my being. To my body, yes, but not to my beingness because it's formless. Only a form can have an edge, a boundary, a place where it starts and stops in time and space. So undoing this idea that other beings are separate too will really allow you to experience a vast amount of peace very, very quickly. And anything that we're still suffering with or from is only because we're seeing that we're still seeing it as separate to ourselves. So here's the core issue. Is there really fear that you need to get rid of? Or is the issue that you're seeing yourself as separate to it? Same with unworthiness, same with money, same with time, same with energy, or anything that you seem to need, even peace, even joy. So these three stages for me unfolded kind of sequentially, but they can happen all at the same time. They occasionally, when a human being wakes up to the truth, the seeing is powerful enough the very first time that it destroys your ability to see anything else as separate right there and then. For most of us, it's not like that. We have to look again and again and again to confirm that I can't find an edge to my being. There's a body, there's emotions, there's sensations, but the one to whom they belong, what is that? Where is it? When I say me or my, what am I actually referring to when I say I? When I say I am here, I exist, what am I pointing to with that? Am I referring to some finite, limited version of myself or something much greater? If that finite, limited version of myself has never actually existed in reality, it's been a very long, real, convincing dream, but never was actually so, what remains for me to do then in my awakening? I'm saying this again because our mind will take any seeing that we have, any authentic seeing, try to make a process out of it, try to make some road further ahead to travel before we can be at peace. So it's worthwhile just putting the brakes on and stopping and really looking at what it means that we can't find a someone when we look, a person, a separate being. And the massive consequence of that wasn't obvious to me at first is that if I'm not a person, nobody else is either. And that's really my interpretation of what the Buddha meant, and I'm paraphrasing when he said, when I reached liberation, so did everyone else too. Immediately I begin to see everyone else and everything else differently, not with my eyes, but my inner sight, my awareness recognizes itself as everything else, appearing as everyone else and everything else. And this is the fastest and the only permanent way out of suffering. It is the only way to stable, effortless peace. And the way to that is to go with what you can prove experientially. Everything else that we're suffering from, and I do mean everything else, is based on what we think is true about us and others. The more we think about someone, the more they will seem separate to us and outside of us. The more we'll have these internal reactions and responses to this person or this other thing that we perceive as outside of us, separate to us. But the more that we come to rely upon our direct seeing, what we can prove right now in our experience, you cannot prove that someone is separate to you. You can prove that you don't have any boundaries in your beingness, that you go on forever as formlessness, silence, consciousness, beingness, presence. This now moment doesn't end anywhere, and it is what you are. It's been here forever, and it will be here forever. And that there is no separation between your formlessness and someone else's. Again, it took me a while to get this, so I'm saying it a couple of times here. Something can only be divided into two, or many, or millions, or billions, if it is a form. If it's formless, it cannot even be divided, although we imagine, of course, that it has been. Formlessness in its essence is indivisible, cannot be separated. And we get into these errors in our thinking because we begin to focus on the forms only, rather than the essence. If I look with my eyes, I see a world of forms and shapes and other beings. When I look with my inner sight, I can see I can't find a Helen at all. She seems to be here still, but it's actually absent when I look. And the more I did that, the more I began to see everyone else is also imagining themselves to be a separate being. And actually, through lack of investigation, not even knowing that they can look or even how to look, this illusion sustains itself of me and other, me and all these other beings. And that's the root of all suffering, all fear, all unworthiness. And of course, the core division that we're struggling with, imagined division, of course, here at this point, is usually me and the self, me and God, me and my divine origin, me and my essence. That somehow I emerge as a separate being, a person, as someone, and split away from God. And now I have to find my way home or something like that. What if even that you can disprove right now? Just by looking. The fastest way out of suffering permanently, because this conversation came up this week, what's the fastest, most direct way that I could think of to tell you, and this is it, to come to rely upon what you can prove experientially. Because only that is going to profoundly change your life. You can have the thought, I am infinite, I am everywhere. But it doesn't change your life, does it? You can think, you can know mentally that you are consciousness, you're not really a body. The fear will still be there as the body grows old and begins to fail. It's only an experiential seeing. And what do I mean by that? I mean looking and not finding a someone, looking again and not finding a someone. And then recognizing that this imagined boundary between me and the other being sitting next to me, sitting across the room, sitting in a different continent, on a different part of the world, wherever, that is an imagined boundary only. And that everything I see and perceive and experience, inside, outside, is my very own self, the one being. With that comes, every time you see that and confirm that, greater peace, greater clarity. So if you are struggling with any of those particular seeings, then I am absolutely here to help. And that is the purpose of having a teacher, of being in a place where we can ask these kind of questions, because these are the things that we're all struggling with in our satsang, in our awakening. What if you could prove to yourself today that there is no difference between you and the divine, that there isn't even a you and the divine? How would that change your life forever? And wouldn't that be worth looking at again and again and again? shocking as that may be, and as unemployed spiritually as that makes you, without any further work to become worthy or strive to something, the fruits of that are infinite peace and abundance, joy, love, anything and everything that comes with that, which is a lot. And I can't even begin to put that into words, and wouldn't want to try to put that into words. So I'm going to read a couple of questions that have been sent in by email, because we have quite a few. But I would encourage you, if you want to ask a question here live, to put your hand up, and we'll see how many we can get to in the time that we've got. Okay, so the first question says, Namaste, Helen. Your immense wisdom, guidance, and meditations are really helping me with lots of peace amidst all the painful events happening around me. But I'm still stuck with the memory of my mom's passing away last month and not being able to go for her funeral. Thoughts of not being able to talk or connect with her now put a huge block on my moments of peace. If I am not separate from her or you, why is there so much hurt within? If I am the infinite, why am I looking and longing for her love? I would love to hear from you. In gratitude. So here's an example of what I was just saying, that I might have seen that I'm not a person, a separate being, as someone, but energetically I'm still perceiving my, in this case, your mom, as a separate being. The experiential understanding hasn't hit there. So it suggests really searching, where do you stop and where does she start? Even when her body was still here, you could prove this, even now that it's not. Only the visible aspect of her has gone. Only. The invisible aspect still remains for all eternity for you to recognize as your very own self. So this idea, this hurt, is from this core idea that something has changed for you, that something that you love, or someone in this case, has gone, and that you can't ever get that back. And it's the essence of the feeling of grief, isn't it? And if we look deeper at this, is that really true? Has that really happened? A particular body form has gone, but is your mother gone, actually? And as you look and see where you, if you can't find an end or edge to your being, was she ever something outside of you anyway then? And as you begin to heal this idea that's causing this pain, by experientially looking and seeing, not relying on thoughts, the thought, I'm not separate to my mom, is not going to give you any comfort, because it's only a thought, but an experiential seeing that the essence of her is still here, can never be gone, and is the very same as your own essence. Then there's a deep connection and intimacy possible there, and the pain and the hurt will disappear completely. We're only looking and longing for love from the outside because we believe there's something outside of us to look and try to get it from. Was the love that you experienced while she was here in a body form ever coming from her anyway? Or were you both allowing the essence of your own self to come from the inside out? So the love that you were feeling, both of you, for each other, was coming from the inside out. And then we rely upon those people to kind of allow us to feel that. So when that body form's gone, we feel a sense of loss in that. So I'd suggest really looking experientially and see what you come up with, and do write back in if you want to, and let me know where you get to with it. So I'll read this one more, and then I'll come to you, Rose, in a minute. Dear Helen, it's been nearly a year now since my beloved dad ended his life. I connected with you then. I remember that, yeah. Wow, a year already. I've come to realize that guilt and responsibility for others has been a strong theme this lifetime. Feelings, emotions, sensations, and images that continually remind me that I'm not loving enough to others, that if I was more unconditionally loving and giving, then I would have done my job properly and everything would have been okay. Of course, on the conscious level, I know this is merely an ego phantom that seemingly eclipses my eternal, pristine nature, but it is a difficult karmic pattern to transcend. My siblings and I don't have much contact with each other at all. Again, at the conscious level, there is a knowing all is well, and yet the little voice that says you should call them is relentless. It is not an urge from the heart. It comes from a place of lack, of wanting not to be in trouble with anybody. A few years ago, I began only taking action when the urge came from the heart, from joy. Can you please help me transcend this, the beliefs that say, I've done something wrong and I need to reconcile. I'm not loving and caring enough, or the belief that I somehow consciously withhold love from others. Thank you so much. Lots of love. So when you last wrote in about this, you were feeling a deep sense of guilt that you could have or should have done something to stop what happened, taking of his life, which you looked at. And now you're seeing it in a more overall tendency here that you tend to feel overly responsible for other beings. You tend to want to please them, tend to want to try to make them like you. The sense that there's something that you've done wrong and you have to make up for it is coming from this, the belief behind the guilt, isn't it? That you, the idea somewhere inside that there's something wrong with you. As you said here, I've done something wrong and I need to reconcile. I'm not loving and caring enough. So also this idea that you withhold love from others. So can you withhold love from others when there aren't any others? Mustn't it then be, it's how it seems, I get that, it's how it seems. It seems I'm not loving enough in my relationships. But it must come back to withholding of love for yourself if there is only you. So where are you withholding love for yourself? There's a real wish here to be unconditionally loving and giving to other beings. Can you ever achieve that? Firstly, if there aren't any other beings. Secondly, if you won't do that for yourself first. So any awakened being who seems to be unconditionally loving and giving to other beings, that's not really what's happening. Really what's happening is they're unconditionally loving and giving to themselves. They've just realized that that self is so much bigger than what they thought before. So where can you start to be more unconditionally loving of yourself? And as you give to yourself like this, you allow this love to come from the inside out. So much love comes pouring out that naturally spills out into your relationships. And because you're not demanding yourself be different than you are in this moment, when you're unconditionally loving of yourself, other beings can begin to respond in kind. They can begin to unconditionally love you as you are right now. So unconditionally loving of yourself, you naturally find it easy to be unconditionally loving of others, and they respond in kind, whether they realize this consciously or not. So you can't give what you don't have if you're not giving it to yourself or allowing it to come from the inside out. So what are you saying, believing, doing about yourself that is not true? Where are you seeing yourself as less than, as imperfect, as not good enough? Are you really withholding love from others here, or are you withholding it from yourself? Here's the real core root of this. Can you even reconcile with siblings and things like that while this conditionally loving part of you is in control, conditionally loving of yourself? I'll love myself when, or I'll approve of myself if, or I'll like myself when. These are all words that we can use to substitute for conditional love. So for me, it was when I can allow money in abundance, I'll like myself. When I'm fully awakened, then I'll love myself. And on and on and on it went. And I had a whole list of things that I had to achieve before I would even come to like myself, accept myself, approve of myself. I came to see all of my karmic patterns were because I had it backwards. I must give that to myself first. And that's simply a habit that we can cultivate. What would the unconditionally loving self say about me? And how is that different to how I'm talking about myself now? And refusing then to say anything that the divine essence of my being wouldn't say about me. And gradually bringing my inner dialogue to a place of matching up, lining up with what the Buddha would say about me, or Krishna, or any awakened being. If they showed up right now, what would they not tolerate? If they heard me speaking, what would they say? I wouldn't say that about you. And will we treat ourselves that way first? And it flips all of our relationships then. If you're insisting unknowingly inside that you're not how you're supposed to be, then everyone else will have no choice, because they are also you, to insist that you are not, and treat you as if you're not how you're supposed to be. So I hope that gives you some kind of way forward with that. But again, if you need more help with it, please do ask. Okay, we'll go to Rose. I'll read a couple more questions later if we have time. Hi, Rose, how are you? You're muted there still.
Right, I'm back again. Thank you for taking my question, and
Hi.
lovely to talk to you and be with you.
It's such a long time since I saw you at retreat.
It feels like ages. Yeah, I've dipped into a few satsangs, but I've had computer problems and things. Just your mentioning then, and you're speaking of unconditional love already, has changed the condition of my heart and the openness of my heart. But I have a question which I've been shy to ask since the end of the wonderful retreat that we did. For the 5 years previous to this, I've worked with a teacher in Indonesia, a Balinese energy teacher, sometimes doing 6 hours of energy practice, very intense practices, and it's been a strong journey and a wonderful journey, and a difficult and a different journey. And my body is very sensitive to energy, and mostly I don't question what happens. I just let energy move through, and when I feel fear about it, I just say thank you. I have a trust that I say thank you, or a mantra.
Yeah.
So at the end of the retreat, something happened, and my body kind of threw itself to the floor, and I shouted the house down. And I may have cried as well, I don't remember. And that was one example. I went after that to a yoga camp, so a field full of very loving beings and lots of energy. Something happened. I find myself back at my little camp, and my lungs are squashing all the oxygen they can get out of them. I'm coughing, I'm burping. It kind of feels like it's all right, it's all happening. And then a mantra comes out, a Shiva mantra. Just in your talk now, I was feeling, gosh, I can't do it. I can't connect. I was all my stuff going on. What is it? There's no point. And then suddenly, energy through me and pink light. But I'm not feeling, oh, pink light, this is wonderful. I'm off with the cherubs. So I would love your insight and your support and some understanding of this, because it's been happening for a long time, but it's not making me feel like I'm moving forward on my journey. All it is affirming some sensitivity I have, possibly.
So just so I can get clearer, some strong energy, sometimes there's emotion, sometimes it's just a kind of an energy moving very suddenly, very quickly through the body, and is that what's going on? Is it the same emotion each time, or is it? different?
Often it's not an emotion. It can be just, it's like an energy moving upwards, usually, usually color. And it's usually a red or a pink color. If I'm in a group of people and there's whatever connections I have with those people because I happen to be in a field with them, or because sometimes there's more stuff. It happened at my daughter's funeral. At one point there was laughter, and then another point my body kind of threw itself to the ground. So my physical body gets thrown around.
Right.
Never hurt.
But still sometimes not so much fun.
Well, I wonder why and how linked it is to my old practice, and if there's any use in it. It might be seen to be something more shamanic. If that were my training, and I kind of thought, right, this is what I am doing, then I might understand it more. But I'm not trying to get myself attached to this being anything particular, special about me, or odd, or
Sometimes this natural process, and I'm sure you've seen it anyway, you saw it happening at retreat, people were releasing emotions, things like that. Sometimes they can come very suddenly, but if they seem to come quite violently or very physically, then sometimes there's an idea behind that needs to be looked at. And for a short time for me, there was something very similar, where it seemed to be very, I don't mean violent as in it hurt or anything, but violent as in it was seemingly outside of my control, and was beginning to happen in places that I would rather it not happen in, middle of a busy restaurant or something like that. And when I looked at this myself, I found that there was a very slight fear of the power of the energy that would move up through. So in any authentic awakening, there is a freeing up, a liberation of a lot of the thought energy that's been tied up in believing thoughts, and that will move up the spine and work through the energetic centers of the body, as I'm sure you're aware. And sometimes I'd felt quite strong, and without realizing, I've kind of developed this fear of it, that it would, not that it would physically hurt. Well, sometimes it did when we hit resistance, but when I looked at the root of all of this was this sense that I am separate to this energy. It was so subtle. So separate to the energy in my own body, separate to others' energy, because this effect was kind of amplified when I was in a group or something. It would happen more. And I began to realize that I was, again, anything that I'm struggling with is I'm seeing separate to me. But if energy and consciousness, or energy and self or awareness, are synonyms, the same thing showing up, can it really have this effect upon me only if I feel it's separate to me? So a lot of the time in my awakening was spent looking at these very subtle ways that I was believing myself as separate to something. Energy was one of them, whether we call it Kundalini, life force energy. We could also call it emotion because it comes up as that sometimes. Whatever we're calling it, I'd given it a life of its own and a power over me without realizing. So it's natural for energy to come up and be released during this process. But if it's coming in a very sudden or violent way like that, it might just be worthwhile looking at. And we saw a lot of people dealing with anger at retreats and things like that, releasing some anger. But really, when anger comes up, why does it have to be so sudden and violent like that, or unworthiness? Why can't it just be a kind of, there it is, and I'm going to just kind of let it go now, I can breathe it out, And unknowingly to myself for a long time, here was a way that I was trying to, unconsciously, of course, make it difficult for myself, because I believed I wasn't good enough. I felt that I had to struggle hard and overcome lots of things in my awakening to be worthy of enlightenment. So just looking inside, you might find a little remnant of that there, that I've got to overcome some kind of epic, it's not a conscious thing, is it? But some kind of epic struggle or something. And I'm also just very, very subtly holding this concept of energy as separate to me, as something that can affect me, thereby making myself a limited, separate being again. But we could, you're showing up as energy, life force, you're showing up as thoughts, as a physical body, as a mountain, as a blade of grass, as an emotion. Why should it be any more difficult to release energy than to breathe in or out? And you can feel that separateness. It kind of impacts the heart area, doesn't it? Very constricting when that separateness comes. Does that hit the spot there, hopefully? These are very subtle ways we stay separate in our imagination to things. And it didn't occur to me for a very long time. Thought time was outside of me. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
So just checking, just looking and seeing, do I have to prove anything to myself here or anyone? And if nothing is really separate to me. And when I looked at this, the energy still was releasing, but it became a more ongoing thing that was just kind of going on in a much gentler, softer way. And even eventually the seeing, I'm not even releasing anger or unworthiness. It's not actually leaving me. It's transmuting back into its original form, peace. There's nothing coming out of me, because again, that would be separate. Mm-hmm. It's actually just that the vibration of that energy is changing inside, back on its own journey to peace from this lower frequency that it's been before. That doesn't need to be a difficult thing. That there's 100 ways subtly that we're still trying to prove ourselves without realizing, of course, consciously. Yeah. Thank you. Glad you brought that up, because I'm sure everybody pretty much will experience that at some point, some strong thing coming up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really. Thank you.
Good to talk to you again.
You again, Sunday. Thank you, Helen.
Wonderful. So anyone else like to ask anything or share? Anyone struggling with anything, or I can go back to my questions here. Okay, I will read a couple more questions then. Here we go. Remember which ones I've already read or not. Here we go. Hi, Helen. Thank you for all your teachings. I feel I benefited from the silent retreat. It was amazing. I have a lot of fear that comes up still, and I face it. And I ask the question, am I safe? And it has worked for me. But then I found out that I have to have a CT scan and an operation. So this brought up more fear of the treatment and also made me think about death. I asked the question, am I safe, when this thought arises about the treatment? And that leads me to the question, is it true I can die? And my mind says, I don't know. My question is, am I asking the right question? Also, if I realized or self-realized I can't die, will mind know this also? Will mind figure this out also? Thanks. So simplest answer is your mind will never really get this completely. Your mind might always run through certain thoughts when the body seems to be in danger or something happens to the body. Your mind might still go through the same thoughts, but there won't be any negative emotion like fear attached to that. So the fact that there is still some fear coming up for you, you've done a great job with the contemplation asking, and now it's just asking to go deeper here. So if I am safe as the infinite consciousness, as that one being that is everywhere, then whenever I'm suffering, it must be because I'm imagining something to be separate to me. And here, the thing that we're imagining still is separate and outside of me, different to me, is our body. So if I am infinite and everywhere, there can be nothing other than me, nothing outside of me. And this came up for me too. I know I'm safe, but my body still comes in a situation sometimes where it might be in trouble. And I had to really look then at what the body actually is. What is my body really? It seems, it feels like, it acts like, it talks and walks like a body. What is it actually? Is it really something outside of me, separate to me? And this is also part and parcel of what we were saying with the previous question as well. The body is something that I can still see subtly for a long time as being separate to me. I know this, but will my body get this? The mind says. I know I'm safe, but what about my body? Especially when an operation, a CT scan, and there could be something that needs looking at in that. Spiritually, I mean. So if the fear is coming up, it's because the body is still being believed to be a real thing, as in can actually exist outside of, separate to myself, capital S. And that core division of me and other is back again. I'm suddenly a finite, limited being then, because there's two things, me and my body. I've lost only in my imagination, I've lost my infinite nature, and I'll feel some kind of low vibration, usually fear here. So your mind won't get it at all, and I wouldn't even try to convince it. But the absence of fear here is the experiential understanding that we're looking for. So I would suggest really looking at what actually is your body, really. What actually is it? We know what we think about it. And with the idea that this is a human body comes a whole host of beliefs in aging, illness, disease, life, birth, death. All of those are hanging on this idea that this is actually what I think it is. And even if there is something that happens to the body medically, we can go through that experience without fear. So the fact that fear is still there is just asking this investigation to go a little deeper. I've seen my essence, but I haven't seen that essence extends to what my body is too, that it's also made of formlessness, silence, consciousness, presence, that this isn't any different. Neither is the chair I'm sitting in or the clothes I'm wearing, the laptop I'm using, all of it. But our body is one area in particular, one object, one phenomenon that we keep perceiving as a real thing, separate to me, different to me. This idea of me and my body is what's bringing up this fear, rather than what's actually medically needing to happen to it. So as the body gets older, you might have to go through investigations, things like that. But there doesn't need to be any fear there with that. So just looking at what you can prove experientially. Can you come to find out really experientially what your body is actually made of? Staying with that question until you come back to peace. And the peace stays even when the body is going through these kind of things. Again, just asking again if you need more help with that. It's a huge area where we all identify still as a separate being. The moment I believe something is other than me, I've lost my infinite nature, seemingly. I'll feel like I have, and I'll be finite and small, and I'll begin to suffer again. Okay, so I'll just go through one more, and then we'll leave it for today. Dear Helen, I have a question about processing feelings. Is the feeling of a person in a group always transformed by the being to whom it takes least effort in feeling it? In other words, if I observe an argument of two people and end up crying, did I process the underlying feeling? Or if I feel sick and another person doesn't, but the other person ends up vomiting and I don't, did that person transform my sickness? In the same sense, I have Adyashanti's words in my head, do not take too much suffering of other people as you take their chance to wake up. Or does this apply more to the physical level? I would appreciate your thoughts about this. Much love. So again, here, the idea of separation is getting in the way. It's a really intelligent question, and I want to come at it from two different angles. Well, they're all intelligent questions, but I want to come at this one from two different angles. So if the first way I want to talk about this is the idea that you're in a group, that there could be somebody else's. If the feeling of a person in a group, yes, it will be transformed by the being or by the body, let's say, not the being. So any group, there's really only one being. This idea of me and other is coming into play again with the group, that there are lots of beings with lots of energies, and it will seek out the highest energy being to transmute itself, this feeling. So just the first thing I want to say about that is it will seek out the highest body to feel it and transmute it, yes. If you end up crying after observing an argument, is it that you're feeling their pain? Or is it that you are reacting in a karmic pattern of your own to what's going on, that you don't like conflict or something? You can only really tell that if you're suffering. So you can be crying, the body can be crying, releasing something, but not actually no suffering going on inside, no resistance or anything like that. That's a surefire way to see, is this something that I need to look at, or am I just feeling some energy that's being released? If there's suffering there, then there's something there that needs to be investigated. So I want to reframe this whole group thing. Let's say there's 6 beings in this group. You went to a yoga session or a meditation or something, and there's 6 people in this group, including you. Really, there's 6 bodies, human bodies, and 1 being. In that group, all 6 of you, 6 bodies, will have the same energy within them. Some body mind vehicles might be more conscious of that. So somebody might end up crying, releasing some sadness, but it will be present in all the same bodies. In fact, all the human bodies, but the one that will be able to work on it consciously will be the one that's most awakened, the body mind vehicle. But it is not like my pattern or theirs, it's the pattern that all the bodies are feeling. And the one that's most conscious of it, the body mind vehicle, can be the one that can work on it, question the belief behind it. And it will simultaneously then affect all 6 bodies as you question that, because they are all you. There aren't any other beings on which to give or receive energies, feel other people's things. You can't pass other things on to them. Originally, even simpler than that, the same energy vibrations are present in every body, every human body. And it's just the one being. There's only one being with one set of karmic patterns that's showing up in all of these 7.5 billion human bodies, or whatever it is now. So it's a different way to think about it like that, isn't it? So as you look and see what you're feeling inside yourself, as you work on it in your own body, through contemplation, you are affecting all those other beings in a positive way. If they were to do that work without you knowing, they'd be affecting you in a positive way, your body mind too. It can't be otherwise, because there's only one being. Whichever body seems to be doing the work is just whichever body seems to be doing the spiritual work in that moment. It applies to the physical level, yes, but most especially to the spiritual, which aren't really different, but I know what you mean when you say that. So hopefully that helps there. It might seem like the effect is amplified in a group, but that's because of this belief in other beings. The idea of other is resistance to reality, because it's not true. And therefore, anything that my body is dealing with, I'll be in a state of resistance if I'm thinking that other beings exist. And whatever's going on in here will be amplified, bigger, and harder to transmute, seemingly. So, hope that helps with that. We will leave it there for today then. Thank you all for your questions that you've sent in. I'll try to get through a few more next time as well. And I just want to thank you before we finish for honest, open sharing, whether it be this way or live, because it's never easy to do that. to kind of open yourself up. But here is another way that we hold ourselves as separate beings. We maintain the illusion of being a separate being. We feel that I can't share something like this with all these other beings here on Satsang. I can't talk about this karmic pattern. I need to deal with it on my own. And these are the ways that we kind of imagine ourselves to be as someone again. And I'm not saying that you have to open up and share the intimate details of your life on a satsang, and that's not a good idea, of course. But we can say, look, I have this karmic pattern that's still going on, and I'm feeling fear when it comes up or something in that. So what is it that you are unwilling to share inside? What is it that you wouldn't want anybody else to know? And I'm not saying that you have to share that, but the unwillingness to share it is what's keeping that pattern in place. You might never, ever need to open your mouth and speak about it once you have the willingness to see, this is how I'm keeping myself separate. Okay, so thank you, thank you. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.